G'day, I'm Will, and in this video I just want to say a quick thank you for subscribing. I want to share with you my history with photography, and I also want to give you some gear advice and tips. So for the last decade or so, I've been really privileged to be a full-time landscape photographer, and one of the biggest aspects of my job is teaching enthusiastic photographers like yourself, whether it's out here in the field on a workshop or through a digital medium such as this. For me, the camera and photography, it's always been a way to express myself. It's a tool that allows me to just get out my thoughts and the way that I see the world. And it's truly changed my life in so many different ways. And I love seeing it have this same impact on other people. At my core though, I'm a family man. I have two beautiful young children and a very supportive wife who works tirelessly behind the scenes to keep us all going. So I was born and raised in Australia, but over the years I truly fell in love with New Zealand. So about 5 years ago now, we moved here as a family to a mountainside town called Te Anau, down in the far southwest corner of the South Island. Te Anau is known as the gateway to Fiordland National Park. This is the biggest national park in New Zealand, a World Heritage Area. And really, Fiordland is basically the essence of what I love about landscape photography, what I love about the outdoors. It just encompasses everything that makes me feel alive. And coming here the first time, it felt like coming home. So inevitably, it became just that. Over the next week or so, I want to run through some photography tips and advice with you and cover off on some pretty common topics and questions that I'm asked. So today we're going to look at gear, then I'd like to talk about settings, as well as post-processing, and then a concept that I've deemed the 4 pillars of landscape photography. All right guys, let's talk about gear. Now, sorry to disappoint you, but I've got to admit, I'm just not that big of a gear guy. I learned over the years, you know, when I first started, I was definitely very concerned and somewhat obsessive about gear and making sure that I had the right gear to get the photos that I was looking at. And I spent a lot of time researching, a bit of trial and error, a lot of money spent, admittedly. And I've kind of just learnt over the years, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but honestly, gear is just, it's obviously important, but it's definitely not the top priority in order to becoming a great photographer or in order to make beautiful images. You know, we can make great photos with an iPhone. People have been making wonderful photographs for over a century now. So it's certainly not about gear, that's for sure. And really, if I was going to simplify it, you know, I'm a realist. I'm not saying, okay, we can just go pick up a 50-year-old camera and we're going to have a great time using it. No, but the good thing is that modern technology is so good now that if you have any camera made in the last 5 years or so, then man, the technology in that is it's just come such a long way. So you're going to be able to take great images regardless and learn the fundamentals of photography and get that joy out of photography like I have and so many others. Now with that out of the way, so myself, one of the key things I'd say if you want to look at getting into photography seriously is just having a camera that can shoot in manual mode. And we're going to talk about settings next time. But manual mode allows us to have that full control, that creative control of the camera, so nothing is being done automatically. That way we can get the exact results we're after and we're not leaving it to chance. So that would be the main thing, and it's not too hard. Most cameras, even a lot of point and shoots, still have manual mode available as well. So for myself, when I first started, I was using Canon, and then around 2013, I switched over to Sony when they released their very first, it was the world's first full-frame mirrorless camera. And since then, I've stuck with Sony. That was the A7R model, and I've just upgraded to those models throughout the years. So the A7R 1, 2, 3, and 4. So currently, I've got the A7R 3 and the A7R 4. So these are full frame mirrorless cameras. So typically you're going to find there's either a full frame or a crop sensor, and that's just referring to the size of the sensor. Every camera manufacturer now just has really high-end, great products. You don't even have to get the professional grade stuff. So I wouldn't be fussed, and through teaching and running workshops, I've used, you name it, I've used it basically. And there's so many great cameras out there. If I had to go pick up a Canon, Nikon, Fuji, whatever, I wouldn't really complain. They've all got good lenses, good bodies now. The main criteria for me really, the main stuff I'm looking for is dynamic range. The dynamic range is the camera's ability to capture the range from the darks to the lights, the shadows to the highlights. How great is that dynamic range? You've probably encountered this before, where maybe you've picked up the iPhone and you're trying to photograph something, say inside, it's quite dark and then there's a bright window there. It'll overexpose the window and get the inside of the house correct, or maybe outside the window is good, but the inside of the house is really dark. That's a scenario where the camera, say on an iPhone, is struggling with the dynamic range, and it happens with every camera. So the Sonys that I use, they have a really high dynamic range. That means when I'm out in a scenario where I might have some dark mountains or a cave or something, and then a bright sky, the camera has a pretty good ability in one exposure to capture all that detail. When I first started photography, there was no real cameras that could do that. Every time you'd have to take a series of exposures, different exposures, and then we had to blend it together in Photoshop. Whereas now, most of the companies, they have this high dynamic range on their sensors. So that's what I'm looking for, the high dynamic range. The other thing for me personally is inbuilt image stabilization, or IBIS. That means that the camera body itself is stabilized. So if there's any shake or movement in my hand, it doesn't pick it up as quickly compared to a camera that doesn't have that. At the moment, pretty much no DSLR has that. That's in the mirrorless bodies. And that is one reason why I'm a huge advocate for mirrorless, because what that IBIS allows me to do is not use a tripod. So when we talk about what's in my bag and what I'm using, 99% of the time, it's those two bodies, and then I have 3 lenses, and that's it. Now, once in a blue moon, I might do a night photography shoot. Not very common for me. I much prefer light and working with light instead of being in the darkness. Yes, I'll pull the tripod out then, but I just never have it with me. I never travel with it. So the 3 lenses I have a 16 to 35mm wide angle, f2.8, that's a Sony. It's really sharp. It's probably my main workhorse. I'd say this takes 40% or maybe even 50% of my images. This allows me to capture grand scenes and incorporate basically anything from what's at my feet to everything in the background. So it's a really good tool for just adding depth and layering to your scene and including so much of your environment that you're in. My other lens that I use quite a lot as well is what you'd call a mid-range zoom. This one is a 28 to 75. So now it's overlapping with the wide angle and now taking us to 75mm. This is a Tamron, it's an f2.8, so 28 to 75. This is great for capturing stuff scenes and frames that somewhat look similar to how the human eye sees the world, that type of mid-range. That's very common. We don't always, with our peripherals, we can see a foreground, but often we're looking in that 50 to 60, 70mm type range. I mainly use this one for aerials though. That's why I actually purchased that lens. I don't find myself using that too much on the ground, but I definitely do, and it plays a key role in being in my kit. Then the last one is the Sony 100 to 400mm telephoto lens. So this guy is for obviously getting things that are far away, far off in the distance, compressing scenes, pulling everything together. Now all 3 lenses, I rely on so much. It would be hard for me to get rid of one of these lenses. If I could only use one, and if someone was saying, all right, what's one lens to get? I'd probably say the wide angle. I just feel like there's less restrictions then. One of the common things I see when people first start out is they don't have a wide enough lens. It happened to me when I first started. I had a crop sensor. When you have a smaller sensor and not a full frame, the lens you use, it zooms in a little bit. You don't realize it's just the sensor crops it in. So let's say if you put the 16mm on a cropped, you'd actually be more around 24mm for argument's sake, something like that. So yeah, when you first start out, that might happen to you. And then I've seen time and time again with people where we finally get that wide angle on and bang, now we're able to capture so much more of the scene. And it's amazing with the wide angle, the way that the lens is slightly distorted, how it has this naturally natural effect, it's a bit of distortion, a pincushion effect with the lens where it just tapers the eye and allows the eye to travel into the scene so much better. So I feel like, you know, if I was going to recommend getting one lens, it would be that one. But really, if you look at my setup, I can go from 16mm right through to 400. So there's really no barriers there creatively. And I know it's hard, it's a big investment when you're buying this gear. It's really hard to go and buy a great body and then get the different lenses. It takes time. So consider maybe just getting a nice body, starting off with something, you know, if you want to look at, I would really suggest going full frame straight away. The problem with getting the crop sensors is they make different lenses for the crop. Now you might buy 2 to 3 lenses to fit your crop sensor camera, and then after a year or so you decide you want to go full frame. Unfortunately, all those lenses now are going to be no good. They're just not going to work on the full frame body. It's just better, in my opinion, to just go straight to full frame. Maybe start off with a point and shoot or even the phone. Do it for a few months. If you're still really enjoying it, then it's pretty safe to commit to just buying a full frame straight off the bat and then just go for it. And then you can slowly accumulate lenses from there. And like I said, Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fuji, all the big guys, they all have really good full frame cameras, mirrorless now as well with the stabilization. I would personally suggest looking at going down that road. The DSLR, you'll definitely need a tripod more, and there's nothing wrong with using tripods. Most of my clients still use them, even though I do show people how to do my handheld methods for achieving the results that I get. But if you do have a DSLR, then you will not be able to be handheld as much. And the reason why I like being handheld, it just gives me that creative freedom out in the field. I'm just able to be a bit more spontaneous and just get into what I call the flow state a little bit better, where I'm not actively even thinking, I'm just doing. When I'm on the tripod, I feel like there's a bit of a disconnect there for me personally. But again, nothing wrong with the tripod, and it does allow you to do things that with my handheld approach, sometimes it might be a little bit more work later on in the computer in processing. And we're going to talk about processing in the next upcoming segment as well. So that's it, that's all that's in my bag. Just the 2 bodies, 3 lenses, even the second body I didn't get until recently. If you have a modern camera made in the last few years and you've just got some nice glass, you've invested in glass, whether you get the native glass or go for a third party like I did with Tamron. There's a brand called Sigma as well, which makes good ones, so they're a little bit cheaper than always getting the native glass. You're going to be well and truly equipped for getting out there and taking great photos. The other thing I have in the bag is just this small little pouch here, and then this is just all the little bits and pieces. So a dust blower, which is really handy for the mirrorless because the sensor's exposed when I take the lens off. So with the blower, I just blow the dust off. I do that once a week or something like that. Spare batteries, cables. I can charge the camera body through the car or a portable battery pack. So there's just a micro USB or a USB-C on the side. So you can just charge that with a USB cable. Spare memory cards. I also have a 2x extender, which goes on the 100 to 400 mil, and that will double the reach. So instead of 100 to 400, it becomes a 200 to 800. And I do have a handful of images in the portfolio with this guy. Lots of lens cloths. Jump on eBay or Amazon or something like that. You can get a packet of 100 of these for like $10. Don't buy them from a camera shop. They're going to charge you 20 or 30 bucks. You can get, like I said, 100 or so really cheap. And then I've got a headlamp in here as well. It's always handy to have. And that's about all really. So nice and simple. The key things to getting a good photo is not about gear. There's so many other things that go into it. And we're going to talk about that later on when we talk about the 4 pillars, the 4 critical things in landscape photography. So anyway, thanks for your time. Sorry if I rambled on too much, but that's the gear that I like to use. All the images I've made in the last probably 7, 8 years now have been using these Sony mirrorless cameras. But like I said, you don't have to get Sony. All the main companies now are making great cameras. There's more than enough out there to get you started on your own photography journey. Maybe borrow a camera off someone as well if you want to dabble in it for a bit before you commit to buying anything. If you have any more questions, just hit me up anytime with email, DM me on social media, whatever you like. More than happy to help you out, because I remember what it was like to first start out and just feel a little bit frustrated in regards to what do I need, which one do I buy, why is these prices so different? It's confusing, and honestly it does take away a little bit from that creative side of photography, and that's the fun part, the creative side. but we need this technical aspect as well, unfortunately. But once you can grasp that, there's no boundaries, and you just are fully in the zone, and there's nothing like it. Anyway, thanks for your time, and I'll see you in the next one.